Hi, this is Werewolf the podcast, and we're on episode 121. This particular series started at 112, so if you want to go back and listen from there, it'll make a lot more sense, but I think they're pretty much standalone. You can go to the description if you want to join all the lunatics in all the different social media groups. It's great to chat to you all the time, and the things that you discuss, well, yeah, they're sometimes a little bit worrying and sometimes a little bit scary and sometimes a little bit, well, sometimes they're hilarious, to be honest. Thanks to those that download us and review us, because it really helps the show get out there and be easier to be found. The audience is growing significantly every week, which is a bit scary, but thank you very much. It's wonderful. And even more so, some of you are actually going to the Support the Link show and actually buying us coffee now. And as you can imagine, to get one show out every week takes a lot of coffee, a lot of not sleeping, and a lot of, well, it's a lot of fun, to be honest. But hey, if you can buy us a coffee, that would be wonderful, because it really, really helps. Anyway, back to the show. You should now know that Sally is driving her little bus away from Will, who she's just dropped off after telling him that she's pregnant with, it could be puppies, it could be werewolves, it could be a baby, we don't know. So at the moment, she's driving away confused because he didn't really seem to care. So here we go.
Sally. I didn't stop driving until the need to pee overcame my tiny inept bladder. There are some things in life that you cannot ignore, and one of those is an overfull bladder. I pulled over to the side of the road. I was somewhere in the Surrey Hills with no idea how I'd got here. Actually, I suppose that's a lie. I got here by driving and thinking about other things other than driving. I spied a parking place with its big P sign and pulled my VW bus over. The P clearly doesn't mean it's for parking. It means it's for pissing. Duh. So I sheltered behind my beautiful VW bus, hidden for prying eyes, and relieved myself, all while enjoying the beautiful view. There are few things as satisfying as a good wee when you need one, and I could feel my body physically relax as I released the specific sequence of sphincters down below. The piss was somewhat cathartic. I felt my mind relax. It was like letting go of mental waste, as well as, well, bonus, getting rid of watery kind of waste too. The relief was wonderful. It was time to think of other things than the disaster that will. Time to see if I would go for here. As I was asleep in the back of the bus, and it was awfully nice to not have her intruding in my head with her telepathic capabilities for once. As I hope you realise by now, is my wolf soul. She's donkey's years old, like feckin' hundreds of years old, and is the invisible spirit that can combine with me and make me a werewolf or wolf. Yup, both. Cool, eh? She's old and wise and a bit judgy, but I think anyone would be if they were over 100, or a few hundred years old. I mean, have you ever got into an in-depth conversation with your old relatives only to come away, like, super offended? Anyway, by now my mind was numbed, and a smile was on my face that had not been there for a while. That was refreshing. A lot of things had not gone my way, but when you got down to it, I was in a pretty good place, really. I had my beautiful Samba VW, I had my wolf soul and all that came with it. Her, she, them, they. Time to pull up my big girl knickers. Underwear for you Americans. And get on with it, right? Back to reality, and in this case, quite literally. Pull up my big girl pants, since my cathartic pee was well and truly over now. At the end of my my stupidly long wee, my calves were stiff, but dry, thankfully, not too much splashback. And I realised I'd not brought anything to wipe with. Oh, crap. No, not that kind of crap. I hurriedly checked my pockets, trying to find an old, crumpled anything, a tissue, something absorbent. Absorbent? Oh, shit, everything was going to rats. Ah! Oh, wait, got some chewing gum wrappers, a crisp pack. Oh, shit. Neither of them were going to go near that sensitive piece of equipment. Right. So I did the sugar dry technique while I pulled up my cute ass undies and jeans. I would let Will's bank account treat me to a spa hotel tonight and have a luxurious evening there, maybe even some new knickers. So being a little dirty now didn't really matter. I mean, some folk like that. Maybe I should sell them now that they're a bit minkier than I'd normally abide. I got into the back of the VW and set up the wee kitchen counter. No wee, as in small, not pee-wee. I wanted to make myself a cup of tea. I'd spent a fortune on getting this van the way I dreamed of, and more so, actually. To be honest, it felt like a little home on the side of the road, and it was my first real home, and it was mine. As I was sprawled across the back bench, her eyes were half open as she watched me with a bit of interest. She was watching what I was doing. As the kettle whistled, I lifted it and poured the hot water into my stitch-shaped Disney mug. The Earl Grey smelt delicious in the air. I added a little cold water to bring it to the temperature where I could drink it just, right now. I even added some honey, a taste I'd dreamed of since I was a bairn, and then delightfully added it in with my beautiful handmade honey spoon, paid for by the main wolfman himself, of course. As the steam and the flowery smell rose and filled the van, as I spoke, "I apologise for all that's happened to you, Sally," came telepathically from the recumbent wolf. I sat across from her and nodded, blowing on my tea, and answered her whilst taking a sip. It feels so strange being able to speak while drinking stuff, but I suppose you didn't need a mouth or throat or larynx, to have a mental conversation, do you? You have nothing to apologise for, Asa. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be alive, I think. I mean, I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I really do. I feel incredibly lucky to be with you, and the more I know of and learn of Will, the more I realise that he's broken and uncaring for all but him and Fenn. The giant wolf nodded. Her eyes were pits of bonny blue fire as she looked at me. I felt as if she could see right through me. No, it was more like she could see into me, and I felt and thought right to my core. After a long stare, the beautiful beast dropped her head to her paws. I have to say, actually, she seemed a little down herself. I'd not thought that a posit could get depressed about things, but it seems that in this case, she was actually pretty sad. "I'm sad because you are," she said. Again, I nodded in response while I warmed my hands on Stitch's ears. "I tell you what, if you're a keen wolf, I said, let's talk about the past. I confess I'd like to learn a little bit more about your history and stuff so we could get a bit more of an understanding about each other. I mean, only if you want to share, that is. I'd just like to ken more about the person you were, who made you who you are. I mean, especially when you started seeing Will, plus some of the history, maybe, about you guys." The giant head of that giant wolf slumped into her paws as she lay there, obviously thinking. Then, raising that bonny snout of hers, she began to transmit her thoughts. "I'm prepared to tell you, but please just listen. and leave any questions until the end. I nodded my affirmative and sipped more tea. Just as well I made a muckle cuppa of tea. She stepped to the floor and took up a sitting position to tell her story. My tribe of wolves was one of the oldest in the mountains. We have no resolute memory of history, but we were a strong pack made up of many generations. And then a winter like no other hit. The sky stayed dark all day and all night, all the way from midsummer deep into winter. It was cold, cold beyond measure, and death stalked the tundra, and forests taking all. The snow and ice were solid, and the darkness robbed the grazing of the prey we needed so desperately. She turned to look out the window as she continued. The young died, and we survived off scraps and rodents for so long as they could be found. Nonetheless, we starved slowly. The mothers of the litters ran dry of milk, and our pups passed. We started to hunt the herds of humans, and then would take them if the people were not wary. Life was on a knife's edge, and we thought we would fail. A final evening came in the den, and we all shivered in the dark. The end was near, and even a pile of our bodies for the heat could not save us from the bitterness of the night, as so many froze. A light came into the den. Offers were made from the spirits of the humans, and I suppose from a greater spirit than either of us. And to survive, the packs combined. I've no idea how the magic worked, but we got to choose the human we would be with, and together we survived the winter. The tribe combined and became strong. We not only survived, but we thrived. We were something new. We would become the physical wolf, or we could become half person, half wolf. With that came more strength. And humans gained a more predatory mindset, and also the wolves, with a greater ability to think and consider. It was just the perfect mutual symbiosis. As you know, you've been in Surga in Russia. It's the greatest city in the east, and the wolves run it. I bonded with a young female called Aza. She was an incredible individual, and the daughter of Al-Moko, the leader of the wolves this day. Gregory and Grenady had been the brothers who had led the pack, but over the love of a woman came the breaking of brotherly love. They fell away. Grenady left the tribe and disappeared into the east. Gregory and his wife went wolfing and left the pack to make their home permanently in the mountains. They lived as wolves in the wild, only becoming human on the rare times the packs hunted in the wild where they bided. My human and I wanted more than the life we had. Aza translated from the old language, means star, and she was. Our bond was incredible, and I learnt so much from her, and she learnt so much from me. Many years we spent in the east of Russia, but my Aza had an inquiring mind. She wanted to journey and learn more. We met many travelers on the port of Busk, And the day came when she approached her father to see if she could travel the world, and she asked. You see, a woman was not as free in those days as she is now, so he would let her wander the world only if her brothers would travel with her. After much conversation, we convinced Payal, her youngest brother, to come on a journey southeast. We travelled for many months through the countries that you now call Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran and Iraq, and onward to the Middle East, which at the time was at the seat of learning and culture in the world. This first journey led to many more over the centuries and reached a point where Asa would be either accompanied or on her own. Eventually, it depended on whether others wanted to join her. She would listen to the travellers and merchants and go to sites of the most interest to her, and those that would further her learning and understanding of the world. She would spend maybe years or even decades away and then return home and give what she had learnt to the pack. This meant that the pack was well educated and became successful, very successful. Each time she returned, she gave them the next leap in technology or modern thinking. It was great fun for everyone too. We travelled the world meeting all the great and educated of the time. We were at the court of Louis XIV, and as a woman, an uncelebrated part of the newly born French Academy of Sciences. The year was 1682. We were in from the near birth of the Science Academy, which was now at the forefront of scientific development in Europe. The king himself was in his early 40s and was at the centre of the most powerful nation in the Western world at the time. Louis had centralized the country's political power and destroyed the feudal system that had caused him so many issues in the past. He controlled the aristocracy and brought them all to a central hub in the newly built palace of Versailles that I had helped plan, develop, and build. He had taken the entire political power of the French nation and brought it into his court, where he ruled it. He brought France under the banner of one religion, Catholicism, and had given himself a similar level of control over that religion as any pope had ever had in his country. Louis was a brilliant manipulator and had created in that palace a place where any noble would want to be. In the palace could be found the best theatres, music, sex, hunting, marriage potentials, and employment. If you were not housed within Louis's court, you were seen as no one. Louis was a rare king, a clever monarch. With all his nobles on hand, he could keep an eye on them and give them tidbits and favours depending on how they served his needs and how he felt about them. Another manner in which the Sun King was clever was he raised new nobles from the people and would put them in positions he wanted to be in control of. They were much easier to remove than the more ancient noble families. He banned private standing armies, then brought the old old commanders of the armies into the court as courtiers themselves, as a reward for their service. These men were at the highest ranks of the military system and enjoyed the king's blessing, a great way to seduce them into complying with his wants and wishes and not giving them a reason to rise against him. He was clever, a clever man, supported by a cleverer advisors. The wars he fought were beautifully planned and the product of a great strategist. The taxation system was changed, and he was the first king of France to be able to tax the nobles of France. The man was a genius. He was a true genius, and although we now look at the self-pronounced Sun King as an egotistical individual, he was a brilliant man who could have truly been labelled as the centre of the universe at the time. Why do I go into this level of detail about the king, you might be wondering? We were a favourite of his, living a life of fun and excess and learning. It was like no other time. The world was changed as something new entered the court. Fenrir and I met at a ball in the autumn of 1682. It was, as always, a superbly lavish affair. There were never any different, to be honest. Great food, music, and wine. Oh, the wine. My human was dancing with a minor noble when I noticed them. No, not the man, the wolf. I had known Gennady, and that was his wolf soul, right there, next to the living human statues and looking around without a care in the world. I stood stiff and still, not knowing what to do. The wolf obviously sensed something was amiss as it suddenly tensed and swept the dance floor with its eyes in search of something. When those pits of bright flames spotted me, they burst brighter with recognition, and then the beast padded towards me, his head lowered in a non-threatening greeting. We met at the centre of the dance floor, and he introduced himself as Fenrir. I'd never heard the name before, so I was at first confused, but in polite society we shared our names, so I told him mine. He turned to face my human side and nodded to her. I felt embarrassed and a little knocked askew by his compliment. For him it seemed more complimentary. He turned his giant bestial head to mine again. I paused for a moment and looked around the room. I was searching for Fenrir's other half. There were many handsome nobles in the room, so the choice was a difficult one. They were richly dressed and lavish in looks and style. I could feel Fenrir laugh in my head. He motioned with his nose to the finest dressed lady in the court. Her attire was famously always black. She was said to be in mourning for a past husband with whom no one ever named. The rumour was that she married very young to an old man who died in mysterious circumstances. Those courtiers against her spread seditious lies that she murdered him. The more fun yet equally pervasive rumour was that he had died during their lovemaking. Everything she wore was in shades of black. Even the chemise that she wore beneath her black satin bodice. Her figure was perfect, her perfect hourglass figure, not too fine at the waist, not too wide at the bust or hip. leading into her huge farthingale hooped skirts of black silk and lace. Her stomacher she wore to cover her corsets was intricately embroidered with the most rare of black pearls. The rarest of rare was seen on her. Her hair was styled with ringlets and a coif. A what? A queef? Sally giggled, unable to help herself. No, a coif, a fine laced hooded veil. Again, woman, Jesus. You need to occasionally listen. Anyway, she was again in black, to which the beautiful milk-like skin of her face shone like a bright moon. Her eyes were of the palest blue, and she had ruby red lips. She was a beauty. She was so beautiful that she caused fear in most. But she was surrounded by men nonetheless. I could not tell from here which of those men would be linked to Fenrir. Then I saw her eyes staring directly at me. Oh, now that was a surprise. It took a few moments for that to sink in, but then it made sense. She was known as the Queen of the Corsans and arranged things behind the scenes for those who needed her gift of armoire for the night. On the outside, Louis was a pious man, but he had mistresses and harlots when required, and she was the supplier for one of the primary drugs used in the court. Sex, darling. Her boys, girls, or others were available for patronage at her whim. Why have I not seen you here before? She's always in the court, I asked the wolf.
Well, to be honest, it kinda bores me in court. The seduction and intrigue are all dull. I spend my time in the forests and the gardens. I spend my time in the hills and the byways. Rarely do I come to these things with her anymore. It's hard work. I prefer to wait and go on a hunt with her in the night. The king has made some of the best hunting grounds in France here.
He told me. Ah, I see, I replied. My as a human then met the human eyes of Fenrir's human, and there was a visible lightning spark across the room. I could sense the turmoil in both minds and misunderstanding. Something had occurred between them. Fenrir and I looked at each other. Fen was laughing at my reaction.
As you can probably see, my madam is a fan of the female form. It is her preference, and I'm afraid it seems to be yours.
He nodded to my Asa. If a wolf could have smirked, he would have.
Bin. You fucking what? I asked annoyed. Uniforms have been to my gaff to get my gear. Now, before you fuckers pass any judgment, my gaff is also my parents' gaff. We live together. I know what you're thinking, a man of my age living at home with his mum and dad, but to be honest, I love them, and they love me, and there's no fucking stress there. I basically live in a converted garage and extension that gives me my own kitchen and bathroom with like a bed sit linked to their house. It's perfect. My mum does all that or, at home stuff that needs to be done. And I'm proud to say I've never ironed anything in me fucking life. Even while training at the police, I managed to swerve that shit. Mum cooks and cleans, and me old man, well, he's a fountain of all knowledge and wisdom. Life could not be better, and it puts me in a position where I could save for a deposit for a mortgage if I didn't spend every penny I earn on shite. The uniforms had come back with what was the most terrifying news I'd ever heard, and I'd no idea what to do. They came back to tell me that my parents had been visited by another detective, some DC Kent or something. Apparently, he'd been a lovely chap who'd just put round to reassure them that everything was okay and I would be spending my time in Brutland's fucking hotel, which to him was apparently proper posh. My parents had described Will to the PCs. I checked. DC Kent didn't exist. I panicked. What the fuck was I gonna do? What the fuck? I quickly set off to the professor's room. He had to know this and sorted the fuck out, didn't he? He had to know. Sula. My mother phoned me to see how I was doing. I told her that I would be working away for a few days on a case. I told her no lies, but I thought that I didn't want to worry her much by telling her all. I wouldn't do that to her. Then she told me, "That nice DC Kent came round today to inform us about what was happening with you. He said that the case was so crucial that you could not share details over the phone. I had no idea that journalists would be listening illegally to calls and things. I should realise that kind of thing, with what happened to Sir Cliff," she told me. She was a big Cliff Richard fan and had been cut to the bone when the accusations that were put against him were, put against him. She asked me to do all I could to save her Saint Cliff Richard. The nice DC told us how important it was, and even accidentally let slip you were leading a huge case. That's incredible, baby. That is such a step up. He told us that you had your own team behind you, then everything was going well. I get now why you couldn't share the name of the hotel in which you're staying over the phone and what you're doing. I'm so proud of you. You do know DC Kent is single, don't you? I mean, Detective DC Kent. He was so handsome and nice. He's such a nice boy. He's single, has never been married, and has no children. He said, he had been married to his work and was now considering settling down. He seemed so nice. Do you know him well? I was lost for a moment as I tried to work out who she was talking about. I knew no DC Kent. Colin Kent was a name I did not know. I felt icy chills run up and down my spine. He told you where I was staying? I asked. He did. I know he shouldn't have, but it slipped out. That's a posh place. Are you going in the spa tonight? He was very good-looking white boy. Oh, and he must have come from money. The car he was driving was so beautiful. Your dad told me what it was. What was it again? And he told me how much it was worth. I forget what it is now, but he does seem very nice, and the car seemed very nice. It was all shiny and low-slung like him, and it sounded amazing like him when he drove away. Private plate too. Do you know him? No, I blurted. Gosh, baby, why are you so secretive all the time? I wasn't going to say. I was going to give you the chance to tell me. I am a little hurt, baby. He told me that he'd been out on a date on Friday and he'd promised to see you again. Anyway, I am a little hurt, but okay. The good news is we've only met him once and both your father and I totally approve. Did he tell you where I was staying? Of course, baby, but don't worry, I won't be telling anyone. Although you know how much I love a good bathrobe and hotel slippers if you can remember them. Inside, I was raging. I had to try and keep myself from telling my parents, who I loved so much, to get out of there and to go somewhere safe. Will, well, he'd been to my mum and dad's. He had done the worst thing he could. Not only that, but he knew where I was now. My head swam. What do I do? What the fuck do I do? He would pay for this. I had no idea what I would do. I tried to keep it together as I listened to my mother on the other end of the line laughing as she shouted at my father. Hey, Beelan! Baby's all wordless on the end of the phone. She's all hot under the hijab for the handsome DC. I heard some garbled words that I assumed were from my father, and laughing again, my mother continued. Your father's a right funny man. He said no wonder, as he was so handsome, and he actually fancied him. He's so funny, ain't he, baby? I had nothing to say. I could not even warn her. Look, Mum, I have to go. I needed to get off the phone and get this sorted right now. Oh, wait a minute. I gave your weekend bag to the two nice boys who came round for it. Is there anything else I can get you? I put banana bread in it for you. You better eat properly, baby. I do worry. She was worried that I was not eating, and I was worried that... Oh no, what was I worried about? Okay, Mum. And Mum, I love you. Thank you for the bread. I'll phone you tomorrow, I told her. I pressed the red icon on the phone and stared for a few seconds at the picture of my mum and dad laughing and hugging on the screen. I had no idea what to do. I'd never been here before in my career. Will had threatened all I love. He'd walked into my parents' home and he'd been charismatic and witty. He'd seduced them and made himself so welcome in my world. It was the worst thing that anyone could have done. He'd not threatened them. He'd just shown me how easily he could ruin my life, how easily he could walk into it and simply destroy it. He could have done anything he wanted this afternoon, and I would have been powerless to stop him. What do you do in these situations? I ran to the door and ran down the corridor to find Ben running in the opposite direction. I could see by his face he was under somewhat of a distress. We smiled at each other and turned and knocked on the professor's door with some fervour. We both needed him. Thanks for listening. That was episode 121. Please download and join Facebook groups and review and do those things if you have time, because it really helps us out if you do that. And always remember, what do? We love you. Bye.
Travel the world and the seven seas. Everybody's looking for some.